Your brain is magical, and here's why. The human brain, your brain, is a remarkable computer that can imagine and create entirely new realities. And while that may sound more psychological than magic, just hold on a second, because it really is actual magic. Your brain is magically powerful, and in this video I'm going to explain how you can use your magical brain to do all kinds of amazing things. Now, if you're here because you want to be like Harry Potter and blast flashing lights out of the end of a stick like this, or make your dog fly or something weird, you'll be disappointed because this is real world magic. So grab your quill and parchment to take some notes and hold on to your chocolate frog cards because it's coming up right after this. Hello and welcome back to Real World Magic, where we make your life more magical. My name's Neil Trigger, and it says so down there. I'm going to be your magical host, and in today's video we're talking about why your brain is magical. Okay, so your brain is magical, and I can prove it. Now, aside from the whole perception and reality stuff that you've probably heard about before, like in this video, your brain can do some magical stuff, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first though, I'd like to talk about perceptions and reality stuff. So, people have said that we have 5 main senses, right? Touch, taste, sight, smell and sound. The problem is that that's not exactly true. We have loads more too, like proxiopraxia, or the feeling of where your body exists in space. The thing is that these other senses are kind of springing from the 5 main senses, like feeling is a subset of touch, heat is the same kind of thing. Okay, so you get it. Let's just assume that there are 5 senses though, and we know that there are more. Okay? Cool. So without your pain receptors, your rods and cones in your eyes, your hammer, anvil and stirrup working in your inner ear to make your noise, your olfactory cells in your nose working with your taste buds to create taste and smell, and yeah, those 2 senses are so closely related that they're virtually the same sense anyway. What does all of this have to do with your magical brain? Well, let's get to real magic in a moment, but for now we need to realise that without any of those cool working senses all working together to create feedback about your world, things would slowly, well, stop existing. Thankfully, our marvellous magical brain quite literally creates our reality, and it does it in more ways than you'd think. Sure, it allows us feedback, so we know when we're touching stuff. We know when we see things using our 2 eyes from teeny tiny differences in angle of convergence where physical objects exist in the space around us, and our clever bodies tell us where our body is in space. That's why, with your eyes shut in a silent room, it's easy for you to reach out and touch your nose without looking. In short, your magical brain is creating what you call reality. But can it do more than that? Can it actually change the objective reality that we see? Sure, our brains give us feedback, and certain psychological, psychiatric or physiological conditions like hallucinations, epilepsy, schizophrenia, dementia or delirium can alter or remove our awareness or change perception of objective reality. And so we need to look into some of these things to work out what it is about the way that we see the world that's so special. Humans are pretty unique in the animal kingdom because we have a very elevated opinion of ourselves. You don't often see dolphins strutting around the place, proclaiming loudly that they are the dominant species out of the millions of species on the planet. Then again, we can't be sure of that because we stupid apes aren't certain of what those clicks and whistles really mean anyway. But even though we're probably the most intelligent animals around, we've not exactly figured everything out yet. In fact, we're nowhere even close to discovering even a tiny fraction of the secrets of the universe. We're not even the only animals on the planet with an advanced language system. Having said that, our own linguistic constructs are probably the most advanced of all the life on Earth. And it is this that makes your brain so magical. Language. Language, and particularly written language, was given to us, according to legend, by the Egyptian god Thoth, and it was his book which is said to be the foundation of modern linguistics, and civilization just sprang from that. Now, I don't know if I quite believe that, but there are some interesting findings, even fairly recently, springing from this idea. Let's, just for a second, accept this idea as true for a moment, and I know it probably isn't, but let's just say that language is the key to real-life magical powers. That's a cool idea, but is there anything to it? Well, here's the thing, and hold on to what I've just said for a while I go off on a slight tangent. If you think about something in detail, you'll often find yourself thinking things through using your words. You'll probably have heard voices in your head. So read this passage just here. Okay, so who just read that in Snape's voice, as played by the actor Alan Rickman? Isn't that interesting? You may have only read it in your head, silently, but was it really silent? I bet you probably heard a voice in your head. Everyone does, and here's why. When you read or think using words, your brain shuts off your mouth, but your brain still acts as if your mouth is involved and will say the words. It fills in those gaps. If you couldn't manage that breaking of the barrier between your brain and your mouth, you just speak the words aloud shortly after your brain says the words inside your head. And this is confirmed easily using fMRI scans of people's brains when they are reading silently versus when they're speaking the words that they read. The scans are virtually identical. Now here's the interesting thing. There are some people who have been literally raised by wolves. They're fairly rare, but they do exist. And I think you'll find that dogs and wolves don't tend to have as complicated or complex a linguistic system as humans do. The BBC covered the case of Oksana Malaya, a Ukrainian girl who was raised by wolves. Oksana walked on all fours and howled and communicated like a wolf. The wolves understood her and she understood them. But when she was found by humans and tried to be integrated more into a human society, she struggled. Her own magical brain started to atrophy in the linguistic centres of the brain. That means sort of rot away. She found it hard to keep up with complex patterns. Even after she was taught to speak, she found it very hard to get past her basic primal urges. She explained that her mind wanted to think and act like a wolf. It was difficult for her to explain life before she learned to speak. The reason she found it hard to explain what life was like as a wolf is that when she was, to all intents and purposes, an actual wolf girl, she didn't have the language to explain herself or her existence, even at the time. Some people say she wasn't really alive at that time. Now clearly that's going a bit far, but it is fair to say that her life wasn't the same. She couldn't explain her wolf life because she didn't have the words to explain it at the time. Some people believe this is the real reason that we can't remember being babies. There's something to be said for that, I'm sure, because language and memory develop around about the same sort of time. Do you even know what memory is? You remember talking about times in the past, right? Well, what's really odd is that you remember things at all, because you kind of don't. All you remember was the last time you retold the story of the remembering. Criminologists find that fascinating because it shines a light on a worrying truth that the human memory is kind of easy to fool. Police officers are often careful to use specific language when getting statements from witnesses. In one experiment, researchers showed a film of a car crash and asked one group of participants, how fast was the car going when it bumped into the other car? Another group was asked, how fast was the speeding car going when it slammed into the other car? The results were clear, showing a massive bias in both audiences. The first being significantly slower than the second, purely by asking the question using different words. Your magical brain uses words to remember things, to represent things, and, most important of all, to change the physical properties of the brain itself. I said I'd get onto real magic, didn't I? Well, here goes. Your brain is so magical it can literally change itself and the world around you. You might think this is an unconscious thing, changing your own brain, and most of the time it kind of is, but you can actually use your conscious mind to actively change the shape and even the amount of cells, that is the size, of your brain. Neural plasticity is a feature of human and other brains where if something is impeding the neural pathway in a brain, it will often find another way to get the job done. From people whose brains have been cut in half and still survived, to people with significant brain trauma, like a man who had a huge iron rod slammed into his skull and through his brain during a work accident. He survived too, amazingly. Neural plasticity is a great survival tool to keep the brain functioning and keep the person alive, but it goes further than that and in very subtle ways too. People with conditions like epilepsy and Tourette's syndrome often have very limited vocabulary when it comes to representing the world. The words we use, as we've already discussed, shape our world view, but there's more to it than that. If I say I see what you mean, I'm showing people that I'm talking to that I can see in my mind's eye how they see the world. I can just as easily say I hear what you're saying, and this plays to different people. I know people with epilepsy and Tourette's who, when studied linguistically, often have little to no expression within the audio or kinesthetic or feeling ranges of words. Tourette's syndrome, like epilepsy, is a condition where the subject is prone to move their body seemingly involuntarily, and they often vocalise noises without meaning to as well, in both cases. Now, I'm not a scientist or a neurologist, but I find it interesting that when analysing the speech patterns of people with these conditions, they often lack the words that express sounds or physical sensations. Things like I feel or I get it. It's like their brains need to express this, and so it manifests as these conditions, just as a way of leaking out. Now, I make no claims as to whether this could actually be used as a therapy. Clearly there needs to be a lot more research done into it, but I do find it very interesting that in the limited number of people I've witnessed, their conditions with epilepsy or Tourette's gets much better when they start to use all of their senses, or to represent or represent the world to themselves. There's a BBC documentary about Tourette's too, and if you're interested, one subject plays the drums, activating their physical senses as well as their auditory senses, and when he does, his tics go away. The other participant took peaceful walks where he spoke about listening to the birds, again activating physical and audio senses at the same time, and his tics vanished then as well. They also came back after he stopped, on both occasions, the drums and the guy taking a walk. People with epilepsy would often have lulls in seizure activity during pregnancy or around a wedding. While the former may be explained away by hormonal changes, the wedding can't quite as easily be explained, unless you consider that the words and thoughts used during this period will be about physicality and emotions. Words spoken, music played, and mental rehearsal of the day itself, it's all practicing in the mind, and all the while activating the audio and physical centres of the brain. Perhaps that's why photosensitivity is so prevalent in epileptics. The sensory overload of the visual cortex might physically block the audio and kinesthetic or feeling areas of the brain from providing the input that the brain needs to self-regulate. Of course, all of this might be utter nonsense, but I'm sure that it would be worth someone researching it further. And if you'd like to get in touch with me about it, it's something I'm passionate about, and so let me know down in the comments. If you like this video, please remember to click the like button, which tells YouTube's algorithm it was a good video and more people should see it. That kind of thing really helps me out. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe and ding that bell. By dinging the bell, it makes sure that you don't miss out on any future uploads or any times I go live. These amazing people are my patrons and members, and they are the best people in the world. You can become one of them for £1.99 a month by clicking on that join button down below next to the subscribe button, or you can also follow the link to Patreon, links down in the description. Check me out on social media too, and join me on Saturdays for my live stream at 6 PM UK time, where we chat about crazy stuff and I talk to a magical elephant. I'm afraid that's it for another video. I will see you again next time with some more magical awesomeness, but until next time, as always,
Stay magical.
sure, Our brains give us feedback and certain psychological... What is never mind. You don't often see dolphins strutting around the place. I feel like I'm a bloody dolphin.
Please subscribe to Real World Magic. While you're there, click the bell button to be notified of future uploads, and have a look at all of my social stuff. Remember to donate on Patreon if you really, really liked it, and I'll see you again next week.